Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to take you through my programming journey. The programming languages that I've learned, the tools and the technology that I've explored and learned, the mistakes that I've made, the decisions that I've made, and all the learning. If you look back in your life, your programming journey, you may find things that are, so helpful that it may help you move forward in the right direction. So I think it's good to reflect back. And one of the programming languages that I'm not going to mention here because I did not learn. If you go through this video, let me know at the end of the video which major programming language I haven't covered. And welcome to Texie Tutorials. All right, so before we get started, a quick reminder that if you haven't done so, please click on the bell icon so you can get some notification for my videos. And also, if you haven't subscribed my channel, do so, and thank you for that. So let me start by saying that my programming journey started without programming because I wanted to be a hardware engineer. I enrolled in a AA for my undergrad because I loved circuits. I had no intentions to become a programmer. I thought, programming involves a lot of typing, and I did not know any typing. So that was the one reason I did not get into it. But my curriculum required at least one programming class. So I had to take it. And at that time, can you guess which programming language was it? So my journey started with this programming language, if you guess it right. It was Pascal. You must be thinking I'm really old. And you're probably right. I am really old. Not that old, but if you've done Pascal as your first language, you are definitely old. I hated programming back then. I did not like the language. I thought, okay, I'm just going to learn something and just forget about it because my objective was, to become a hardware engineer. Then they said, oh, there's another programming language that you have to learn. Can you guess that one? Assembly, because of the hardware, I think assembly was a little better because of the nature of the game, which was hardware. I finished my undergrad in a EE and I moved to doing masters also in electrical engineering. But remember, life has plan of its own. It never takes you where you wanted to go. And so life had a plan for me. So programming kind of chased me wherever I go. During my master, I took my first class, which was signal processing, and the teacher did not tell me that there's a programming involved. But after like halfway through, it says, oh, the project is actually in coding. Can you guess which language was it? It was, you guessed it right. It was in C. Those days we had this Unix, Unix workstation, the Sun Station, right? So I learned Unix. And also I learned around the same time I learned MATLAB and Simulink, which was pretty fun because I was learning some control systems as well. Okay, so after that, when it comes to finding job, again, programming chased me there as well. So can you guess which language? So I was working in the electrical field and then in the aviation field, basically. Then one of my managers said, oh, we need to build some, like a bug tracking tool for internal reason. Can you help us out? And somebody recommended this particular language, Visual Basic. I actually bought a book on Visual Basic and I learned from there. And then I thought, okay, you know what? Instead of doing in Visual Basic, because we had to save some data and all that stuff, I decided to use something else. Visual Basic for application. So it's like a build directly in Access, so Microsoft Access. And I actually built a whole bug tracking tool in VBA and it was fun. And I thought, you know what? I think programming is my thing. This is the game I really like. So I quit electrical engineering. And the next gig I looked for, which was in, I learned some SQL. And then the next gig was at aerospace. Because I was coming from aviation field, I went to aerospace. And that's the first time I got into web development. This is like early age. I think JavaScript was in infancy at the time. So I started with something called ASP, Active Server Pages. Like most of you probably know ASP with like .NET ASP. This is like a before .NET. It was silly language. And what about front, so I learned HTML, CSS, the basic version of it. But there was something needed for the front end as well, but I did not use JavaScript. I used something called VBScript. Yeah, because most of the work was in Internet Explorer back then. So this was the right choice at the time. It was painful language. It's like a VB for scripting in the browser side, if those who don't know. I don't think it exists anymore, but I also learned SQL Server because we were getting data from there. All right, so the next chapter of my life, obviously, I learned some HTML, CSS, and then C# came out. And I was actually looking to C#. There was like a lot of people talking about it. This cool language coming out, has lots of features, and it was really cool. And so I actually built some data processors in C#. A phase of my life started with this language. And you're not gonna guess. Again, VBA, but in Excel. Actually, I coded for about 5 years in Excel. And about 4 years, should I say, in Excel. I got so good at it that I started teaching. The next gig I took was in accounting. It was the same company, but in accounting area. PHP was a language. It was very famous. A lot of people were using PHP. And around the time I also learned Linux because Linux was kind of up and coming, and I also learned Photoshop because this is the kind of a time when I started going to front end. There were no designers. You had to build your own design. You had to build your own assets, So I learned Photoshop and Adobe, all the Adobe tools. Around the time Jquery came. I started JavaScript a little bit, but then Jquery came. And that changed the game completely. I started to get interested in, okay, I need to now learn JavaScript because this is really cool. So I did a lot of jQuery. That was a time, I also learned WordPress, and CSS3 came out around the same time. Well, some of the features were coming out, and this is the time when I realized that front end is the goal, because all of this three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then design. I think iPhone came out, and I got into Objective-C. There was one of my friend was building a project for some movie studio for Hollywood, and there was some iPad application he wanted to build. So we got all jump onto it. So I learned Objective-C, and we started building an app, but the funding did not come through, so we had to drop it. So because of that, I also learned design, like full design, learned the color, design, the space, and the whole thing. I took classes at a community college to learn design. And then the next phase of my life started. I got into a financial domain, and this is the time I carry over project, on jQuery, and they were using some different backend on Perl, so I learned Perl. It was, I think, Strawberry Perl or something like that. Didn't go too deep, but then they eventually moved to ASP.NET, which was very famous back then. So I got into ASP.NET, and around the time Angular came out, and everybody was talking about Angular. So I said, okay, let me try it out. And I did, and I really liked it. So that was the first framework exposure that I had. And so I translated my application. It was a financial trading application. So I built a little trading application where you put some money, say $2 million, and it spits out all the trades that you wanted to do. And then around the same time, I started getting into Git, because we moved from, I think, VSS or something like that to Git. And, because of the Angular, then the whole tool set coming up, right? So we had to do all our varring with Angular. It wasn't a CLI back then, so you have to use gulp. And Sass came out around the same time, so it was fun. The preprocessor for CSS. And then came out Angular 2. So I got actually on Angular 2 really early because I wanted to jump onto that ship. It was using TypeScript. I got to learn Jasmine, Karma, because it was a full CLI. Around the same time I was looking for a job. So this is the time I decided, okay, I need to make my fundamentals very solid. I never had like a formal computer science education. So I took, my sweet time and learned a lot of algorithm and data structures. And, I got into the fundamentals of it, the big O notations and every other data structure. And, I went through a bunch of books and a bunch of websites to make that base very solid. And obviously around the same time, because of the Angular, ES6, and obviously TypeScript. And then the next phase of my life, this is where the modern framework was started coming out right after Angular. And so the next job I had was Ember. Ember was a pretty sweet framework. It was like its own ecosystem. It had a data, it has testing library, everything kind of built in. It was more, bigger than Angular in terms of what they provide. Because of that, I learned Babel, package management, NPM. I felt that I had to kind of get deeper into NPM, because you can actually do PhD in NPM if you want to, because all this dependency management and resolution, it is quite complex if you ever have issues, right? We were using Mercurial. It's an alternative to Git. And this is the first time we built our first component library that you can consume in a project. So I got to learn a lot of fundamentals of that, building your own component library and do's and don'ts of it. So this was pretty fun. I think this is the new phase of my life started. And you would see that from here on, I'm learning at least 6 or 7 things every year. Selenium also, because we were doing some testing, and so we got into Selenium. And then the storage came with the virtualization, domain. So I got into that as well. And then Jenkins as well. So on that couple of years, I learned so many things. Then came React Native, because we wanted to build another project. So got into React Native. Again, usually people get into React, but I just got into React Native, not React, because I think this was a better version of React Native. Jest, Jasmine, Redux, Thunk, there was a library called Detox, which lets you do end-to-end for React Native. So fundamentals of end-to-end testing, analytics. Then I moved to credit domain. And this was fun because I wanted to learn Node.js, because that was a kind of a mystery, because, it fits everything together. If you look at the whole ecosystem, CLI, right? It runs by Node. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna learn Node. And I did from, on my own time from scratch, and actually build a whole tutorial series on it as well. I'll provide a link here. So now learning Node helped me understand the Webpack, which was a mystery for me at the time. I got into DevOps, localization, internationalization, GraphQL, create React app. So I actually took React and I said, okay, I'm gonna really understand React now. So I really understood it back then. Also, security aspect of stuff, JS security, A/B testing, and all of that stuff. So at this point, I'm becoming very solid on React and very solid on JavaScript, on all the fundamental. Then came React hooks, which changed the game for me. I just loved React hooks, the whole functional way of doing things. Got into a little documentation using Style Guidist, and built a component using end component, basically a wrapper. So my own component library using end component. And then Cypress for end-to-end testing, Azure for B2C, Docker, style components, contentful, CMS, Storybook. It's so many things. I'm just not listing half of the stuff here. Just this year's one of my friends said, okay, you want to teach some high school kids, so there was a need for Python. So I actually took Python and started learning from scratch, and actually I taught a class on Python, at least 2 classes, and it was a lot of fun. Games in Python. Okay, so that brings us today. Can you spot which major programming language I did not learn? I learned a lot of programming languages, but there's one major language I've missed. Which one it is? Can you tell me? Please comment. And what should I learn next? So I'm just thinking about what should be my next programming journey, right? If you can recommend something, I would really love to know. And also share your path. create a link of all the only programming language you learn. I just want to see, because it's interesting, how people switch from one language to another. I want to see if there's any pattern. So if you can share your path in a comment, that would be nice as well. So that's it, folks. I hope you learned something new from this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and provide a nice comment. And you can follow me on Facebook. I have multiple groups you can take advantage of. And you can follow me on the Twitter, and also I have Medium articles which you can subscribe to. And you can also purchase my courses. I have a React Hooks course and JavaScript course. And thank you for watching.